So is Quebec going to be the new conundrum for this government? Well, for the last two and a half years, the Liberals have moved on issues important to the NDP, like dental care and pharmacare. And in exchange, they got support in that minority government. Now the Bloc Quebecois looks like they're ready to dance with the Liberals. The Liberals are getting ready to boost old age security by 10% for seniors over the age of 75, but Yves-François Blanchet wants that extended to seniors who are 65 as well. That's his first ask. So let's bring in the front bench on how much further all of those demands could go. Mike Le Couteur is the former Deputy Chief of Staff to Paul Martin. She's the CEO of Vanguard Strategy. Mélanie Paradis is the former Communications Director to Aaron O'Toole. She's now the President of Texture Communications. Former Ontario NDP MPP Gurritan Singh. He is the Vice President of Crestview Strategies, a great waiver. He's also the brother of federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and the Ottawa Bureau Chief for La Presse, Joël Denis Bellevance. Thank you all for being here. JD, let's start with you. Quebec's demands really front and center right now in this parliament. How delicate is this dance and that balance for this government to strike to basically come to the table with the Bloc Quebecois but not alienate the rest of the country?
That's a big, delicate dance. And I would say that the Bloc Québécois comes in with that dance with heavy shoes that could hurt the toes of the Liberal government very quickly because they have expressed their demands. It's been, there are some numbers with those demands. It's $3 billion minimum per year. So
right.
does the government has the margin, financial margin to satisfy the demand? I'm not sure. I've asked that questions and there's some resistance in the finance department on this one. And Yves-François Blanchet has asked that they satisfy that demand quickly. They're not going to have many cups of coffee to talk about the weather. They want real action fast. And on the other side of it is the fact that the Bloc Québécois is facing some pressure from the Quebec Premier, François Legault, to topple the government. And Mr. Legault, before I came on this show, was repeating that demand in a press conference in Bécomo in Quebec. And so the pressure is on, and I'm sure that Mr. Blanchet is thinking already about his next move, which will be, in my sense, probably a non-confidence motion tabled by the Bloc at some point to provoke a fall election.
Right, and we'll talk about further non-confidence motions in just a second. And the Parliamentary Budget Officer, Michelle, has pegged that hike in the OAS to about $16 billion over 5 years. Now, at one point, the Liberals had strong support in Quebec. Do they have to look at Blanchet's demands very seriously now?
Well, I think that, a new player's in town, so to speak, and it's the first time that the Bloc has kind of flexed its muscles in terms of keeping the government going. And I guess the big question is, how much do they want an election? It doesn't sound like the NDP are quite so keen for an immediate election, so perhaps they have a little bit more room to maneuver. And perhaps that was, what Mr. Blanchet put on is just a kind of a starting position, and that there's some room to negotiate. But, the Liberals have to decide, what do they want to hold this election on? What do they want the ballot question to be on? And essentially, how do they want to fall? What question do they want to fall on? And figure that out and work back from there. I don't think that they've done that work yet. I think that seeing how the House is going right now and different players are coming with different demands, they're going to have to do it really soon because time's going to be slipping away from them, and everybody else is kind of putting their hook in the water and trying to figure out what fish they want.
Yeah, and Melanie, we know the Conservatives are trying to make a play for Quebec as well right now. And we can see it with Poilievre's distinct messages in his questions, not only in the House of Commons, but also his press conferences outside of the House of Commons. Talk about how Mr. Poilievre is trying to really wedge here with the Bloc Quebecois and kind of insert himself into this conversation when you consider the overlap between Quebec politics and Ottawa right now.
So Blanchet is not just a new player in Ottawa. He's now made himself the Liberal Party's Quebec lieutenant with this move. I think that the whole reason why OAS, why he's fighting for old age security to be increased is because the Liberals have, with their inflationary spending and with the carbon tax, have made life so unaffordable for seniors across Canada that it has to be increased because their life savings is no longer going to go as far as they thought that it was going to go. And so they need to have this additional funding. Where he runs into a risk with Pierre Poilievre is they are going after the same change voters right now. And the more that Blanchet, as the Quebec lieutenant to the Liberals, props up this government, the more those voters are going to be attracted to Pierre Poilievre because he is the only option for them. These are largely men in suburban areas. We know that there is a significant portion of Quebecers who are looking for change. There are people all across Canada who want change. But I think that their target demographic in particular on this, that Blanchet and Pierre Poilievre are fighting over are men in suburban parts of Quebec.
I think the Liberals need to call Jean-Yves Duclos because Melanie has decided that he is no longer the Quebec lieutenant at this point. Melanie, always bringing the heat, eh? Gerda, let me bring you in on this one. NDP's candidate lost that by-election in Montreal. Do you think that this shows that the party's message isn't really getting across in that province and as a result, no longer such a player and in this conversation at all?
Well, the very fact that the NDP was within 2% of the Bloc Quebecois in LaSalle, Verdun, Imard, LaSalle, Imard, Verdun. I may have messed that up.
It's all right. It's all good.
It's all
you
good.
got all three in there. That's all that matters, really. Yeah, exactly.
But basically, it demonstrates that the NDP is actually a huge player in Quebec and especially within Montreal. We're seeing the NDP increase their vote 6%. They were within a very small margin of the Bloc who won. It's demonstrating that the NDP actually has a growing momentum across Quebec and within Montreal. And really, if you look at it, if you look at the past two by-elections, it demonstrates that in both ridings, it was the NDP that beat the Conservatives. That's the only party that can say that within those two by-elections.
I understand that, but with respect, your brother spent a lot of time in LaSalle, Imard, Verdun, and they still lost.
Thank you for correcting the order for me as well.
No, that's fine.
But I would say that's fine. I recognize that it wasn't a win. But if you look at it, a 6% increase within 2% of the winner of that by-election, those are quantifiable numbers that we cannot debate. Mm-hmm. Numbers don't lie, and the numbers demonstrate a huge growth in that by-election during, with respect to Jagmeet's involvement and the overall campaign. It's a huge win, and I think it demonstrates the strength of the NDP because the NDP is fighting for those values which are very consistent with Quebec priorities around investing in a strong social safety network, dental care, pharma care, increased investment in our health care. These are progressive values that are often have a strong audience within Quebec, especially within Montreal.
Okay, JD, let's bring it back to the whole question of whether or not this is actually going to be difficult for Justin Trudeau to, at one point, deal with the Bloc Quebecois, make sure he gets their vote, make sure they're happy. I mean, he says Blanchet already says he's going to vote for them. So you wonder what kind of leverage he actually does have, even though he says he has it. But how does the Prime Minister now make sure that it doesn't look like he's dancing with separatists?
Well, that's the key dilemma for Mr. Trudeau. He needs a dancing partner, but how will that be seen in the rest of Canada if Mr. Trudeau's government survives with the help of a separatist party? I don't think it's going to go well in Toronto or in Ontario, and for that matter, in Alberta. You've seen already Danielle Smith saying that we can't afford to see a separatist party having the upper hand of the parliamentary agenda, and she was calling already for a fall election, for federal elections to be called right away. So that's a very delicate balance that Mr. Trudeau will have to say that if they dance too closely with the separatists, there may be a political cost to be paid outside of Quebec.
So, Michelle, is that why do you think that it only helps the Prime Minister to get this done and dusted as quickly as possible, or does he have to try and really frame it differently to the rest of Canada and say, look, we're doing this not just for Quebecers, not just because the Bloc Quebecois said that they want this, but look, it's going to benefit seniors right across the country?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they need to reframe it. They need to make it part of their own kind of package. And they need to make it part of the message of keeping the government going. Canadians actually don't want an early election. There's no polling. There's no suggestion that they're clamoring for us to go to the polls. And I think that for most Canadians, it would become a big shock if all of a sudden on Wednesday the government fell and they were heading to the polls nationally. So I think that the Liberals do have that in their back pocket a little bit, but they have to use it. They have to be able to actually communicate what they are doing and they have to communicate it within their own kind of a platform. I just want to say, like Mr. Harper, you certainly had no fear about using the Bloc Quebecois to prop his government up from time to time. So it's they're elected members of Parliament, and I think that for a short period of time, it's completely fair that you're going to be trying to build those kinds of coalitions as you go forward. It's not a long-term strategy, however, and we'll see how long that can actually last.
Melanie, as I give you the last 30, I'll also note that potentially, while Michelle says not a lot of Canadians want to go to the polls, I think there's probably 40% or so, according to Nick Nanos' numbers, that likely want to go to the polls right now. But talk a little bit about how this isn't the first time, as Michelle noted there, that a federal government has to dance with a separatist party, as she noted with Stephen Harper's government.
Well, look, the influence of Quebec is felt throughout our politics. They have obviously a very significant part of our federation. They've got a very large population, so they're always going to be an important player. And I think that the Bloc are smart to put their asks forward and to use this opportunity to negotiate what they can on behalf of Quebecers. But even Premier Legault came out and said, don't use this to prop up the Liberal government, because that's not what Quebecers want. And so it'll be interesting to see how long this bromance will last.
If it is a bromance, I don't know that they're even that close yet, Melanie, but we'll see. We'll see.